I am the greatest.
Be water, my friend.
Okay, welcome to One Hit Podcast. Today I'm with Michael Muleta, the whole way from Australia. How's things?
Very good, sir. Very good. And good evening or good morning to you.
Yeah, I think it's 10 a.m. here and it's about 7 p.m. with yourself.
7 p.m. Yeah, 7 p.m. here.
So we made the time up between each other halfway in the world. In the past, we spoke to a lot of top martial artists and fitness professionals. So I thought that from the day one that I wanted yourself on because I follow you on Facebook and we're part of the same organisation and everything you're doing there. Sort of, I want people that I know to know exactly what you're at because I find it fascinating. Like,
sure, well, I feel privileged. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's something like stuff you do, I do myself, but I'm still at the early stages of doing it compared to yourself. To talk about the Arnold Classic, about you're heavily involved with Arnold Classic.
Well, as you may or may not know, it's a continental sports festival event. So it started 30 odd years ago in Ohio, Columbus, and then in the last decade it's kind of spread across to several continents. So it's basically a multi-sport festival that runs in conjunction with a sports expo. Obviously, in the early days, it was very heavily tilted towards bodybuilding because Arnold, obviously that's his background. But in the last few years, it involved a lot of sports. In terms of my own involvement, originally I was a major sponsor or the major sponsor of the festival in Australia with my fitness college, Global Fitness Institute, because obviously, that's the captive audience for us. And Taekwondo at that time was in it for the first couple of years, but I wasn't directly involved because the WGF organisation ran it, and it was pretty much a closed shop. You had to be a member to participate. And anyway, they had a couple of cracks at it, and and I gave them respectful distance. And it came about that the organisers asked me if I would oversee initially all the martial arts, and I noticed when I took over that they had dropped Taekwondo from the program. And I had said to them, well, where's Taekwondo sort of thing? And they said, well, we don't have the guy that was running it, hasn't come back. So I thought, well, there's a window, we now could include ITF in there. So we ran a Taekwondo competition the first year, even though I was overseeing all the martial arts, because I thought it was a little bit unfair to exclude the people who'd been there the couple of years before. So we allowed both ITF and WTF to participate, but one competition, but with separate categories. Obviously, we didn't blend them together. That was 4 years ago, so it was quite small. The first one, it was more about just having a presence, and then the second one we sort of grew by five times. And then this year, a week before the country pretty much shut down, we were due to have the first Arnold Classic Taekwondo World Championships, which was a concept that I pitched to them when they first asked me to take it over. I said, in 4 years' time, this is where we want to be. From that first competition with less than 50 competitors, we had 460. But unfortunately, we had to postpone it because the country closed down a week before. So we almost got there, but it's still going to run. It's going to run as soon as the government gives us the okay and says that other countries are actually allowed to enter Australia, because that will be the next thing, of course, because domestically we may open up, but because it's an international event, we need international participants to be able to come into Australia without having to sit in quarantine for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, the USA and Russia and different countries all involved, but with the borders closed, it could be near impossible. Hopefully that everything will open up again and we can attend this sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure in time it will. It's just a matter of getting everyone on the same page, because everyone's got their own views about the virus and the severity of it. I guess it sort of stems from the impact that it has in your own country. Some countries have been affected more severely than others, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah, and everyone's sort of going through different stages of it. Some countries that got affected early, they're sort of coming out of it. Well, there's other countries, like I know a couple of countries in Europe that are still copping it quite bad at the moment. So it'll take time. 2019... leading into 2020, I did the circuit actually. So I travelled to South Africa and I travelled to the USA a couple of times, and obviously partially to promote ours that was being run here, but also always something I wanted to do. So it was a very busy year from a travel point of view. The last 12 months, particularly.
Yeah, you do a lot of travelling, especially with Taekwondo and your work as well. It's a lot of travelling, which it has been many countries you haven't been in the last few years.
Well, just before the virus hit, I was in 7 countries in 6 weeks. So, when you consider Taekwondo is not my job, it's sort of there is a lot of travel that I choose to do. Occasionally it's I try to tie in multiple things on the one trip. If I can do something that's work-related, something Taekwondo-related, sometimes I'll be going somewhere for work, and because I know people in the area, I mean, the beauty of being in international federation is that you know people in most countries, so it's quite often possible to tee up a class or tee up a visit or go along to a championships or something that just happens to be held at the same time. And sometimes it happens in reverse. If I'm going for a Taekwondo trip, sometimes I'll organise some work where I am, because my college is Global Fitness Institute. We have run seminars and workshops in other countries as well. So, one complements the other very much, and it's kind of how I designed it when I started that company.
The company's called Global Fitness, and you do personal training courses and fitness workshops and seminars.
Yeah. I mean, over the years, fitness and sports has always been our focus. The last 3 or 4 years, we've focused predominantly on fitness and first aid. We have done a lot of sports coaching. We're getting back into the sports coaching side of things now. We did massage for a decade, for quite a long time. But it's literally very hands-on.
Yes.
No pun intended. But because I travel so much, we sort of backed away from massaging a bit, because we're not sort of a fan of doing things like massage online or by distance learning. I think that's very much a face-to-face to get the best learning experience from it, whereas other things we can embrace the technology and deliver a little bit more using that technology. So that's freed me up to travel quite a lot. That's why the last 2 or 3 years even though I've been travelling quite extensively for the last 30 years, the last 2 or 3 it's kind of ramped up again. So
same myself. My background, I'm a qualified sports scientist, and I deliver a lot of courses like that myself, and I know what it's like for the online stuff. You want to be more hands-on in the classroom with the student to help them learn.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, the best way to learn is in class, face-to-face, actually doing things and being able to share your own explanations and stories and examples, and people have got different learning styles as well. Not everybody's great at learning off a bit of text or something. People need things demonstrated or explained, or, face-to-face is always the best, but you've got to balance the practicalities as well as the availability of the students as well. We found that a lot of students, couldn't all get there at the same time, or they weren't all up to the same part of the course at the same time, so took a more flexible approach, which is consistent with what a lot of other institutions have done. But I think we like to keep that face-to-face. There's nothing more enjoyable than going along and teaching a workshop to a group of people and having that human interaction,
Exactly, yes. We were chatting there a minute ago about Taekwondo. That's how we both know each other. We're both part of the ITF, the National Taekwondo Federation, and you're an 8th degree master and under-secretary of the ITF, which is quite a feat, especially of all the years you put into Taekwondo. Could you give us a wee background of how you got into Taekwondo and how you got so high up?
Oh, well, the usual way, bribery, and I got into Taekwondo. Well, I was 17 years of age. I had just moved from home. Started at university, physical education course to be a physical education teacher. So I did phys ed and science. I had a sporting background, since I was 8 or 9 years of age, playing pretty much Aussie rules football and cricket. And I played both of those right up to, that 17, 18 year period. But because I relocated 120 kilometres away from my home, and I was too young to have a driving licence, so I couldn't go home. So I couldn't attend the training, which meant if I didn't train, I wasn't going to get a game, because, although I was okay, I wasn't good enough to get a game without training.
Yes, yeah.
And just on principle alone, they wouldn't do it. And at that time, I'd been playing, I was captain of my football team. I was opening batsman in my senior cricket team. I was doing a bit of boxing, predominantly for fitness, and plus I like boxing. So for a couple of years, I was doing that as a fitness regime. So the first thing I looked at when I went to university was boxing. So I was there. I went to the local boxing club, and I didn't really enjoy it, to be honest. I was quite young, 17. I was pretty fit, and I was more interested in learning the sport, for the purpose of at some point getting in the ring and competing. Whereas this club I went to, there was a lot of people who could fight, who could box. They were tough, but most of them were kind of pub bouncers and nightclub bouncers who were there pretty much just to keep their reflexes sharp for their weekend work, not so much for the love of the sport. So it wasn't a great environment, a lot of ex-cons and a lot of rough nuts, So I thought, this is not really not really the right environment for me. I'll probably get led astray if I spend here too long. So one day I'm looking up at the college notice board where they had different activities, and I was actually looking at this karate pamphlet without having had a lot of knowledge about martial arts at the time, other than seeing a couple of Bruce Lee movies like everybody else. A friend of mine in the course said, you're interested in doing karate? And I said, well, maybe, I don't know, something different, And I don't think I'd thrown a kick in anger other than kicking a football at that stage. And he said, well, there's a mature age student in our class, an Asian fella. We were 17, he was about 40. And he's some martial arts master or something. You should have a word to him. So I did. So I approached this guy, and it turned out that he was a 4th degree Taekwondo student, had just immigrated from Malaysia, was a physical education teacher, but the Australian government didn't recognise his qualifications.
Okay.
So he went back to university. So he was there as a mature age student in the same class as us. So he said, come along, try it out. And it turned out that it was Taekwondo ITF. And the rest is history. Sort of started then and haven't had a break since.
So it had to happen then, just perfectly you look at the notice board one day and then next day, bang, you're doing Taekwondo.
Yeah, right place, right time. Had never even thought about Taekwondo one day before that. I knew nothing about Taekwondo. I still remember my first class. Obviously 35 years ago now, but I remember, we trained reasonably hard and we got to sparring and as much as it was fairly controlled and not I wouldn't say it was full contact sparring, but I had kicks whizzing around my head and I was a little bit mystified how these guys were getting their legs up there so easily. And I thought, well, if you'd only stand still, I'll just, I'll hit you with a right hook, And that was the first thing that really struck me was, how much leg control these guys had with their kicking. And I thought, okay, well, that's going to take a bit of work. And, because I wasn't naturally super flexible, having played a lot of footy, and that flexibility wasn't, the key thing. I was more about, strength and explosive strength and power, So, so that was a work in progress. But anyway, that was good times, we trained really, really hard. And, and as a physical education student as well, I was really driven to fitness and exercise and loved it.
That was back in the 80s you'd started training Taekwondo? And
86, start of 86.
And then we're now in 2020. How much has Taekwondo changed since then?
Well, I think the demographic has changed quite a lot. I think, thinking about the classes in those times, we had quite big classes and they were predominantly young adults. Nowadays, most clubs I see are predominantly kids.
Yes.
So I think the age demographic has shifted. Mid-80s, I think it was pretty much Taekwondo was still the most popular martial art. There was a few karate floating around. It was kind of like kickboxing hadn't really taken a hold, not in Australia anyway. I know it was in Europe a little bit earlier and in the States a little bit earlier, but in Australia it hadn't really taken hold yet. It wasn't until the sort of early 90s that kickboxing took hold, and that sort of pulled a lot of adults away and sort of gravitated towards kickboxing. Then, of course, that evolved into, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and then mixed martial arts and so on. So I think Taekwondo today, I think most clubs that I see, their predominant market is juniors. And also, the first 5 years that I trained, we didn't go to a tournament. I went to one, but as a club we didn't go. It wasn't really focused on competitions, and even the first decade of ITF, we were lucky to have 1 or 2 tournaments a year that actually ran. Nowadays, every other weekend somebody wants to run, and I think that's partially because there's a little bit more focus on the tournament side of things, and also because there's so many different groups now that every group, wants to have their own national championships. So we have like 6 or 7 national championships in 1 year of 6 or 7 different groups,
Yeah.
So, so it kind of has its pros and cons. The pros are there's lots of ITF stuff going on. The cons are that you can't get everybody in the same place at the same time. So every event is probably not as big as it could be, or it thins out the quality of the competition a little bit.
Divisions are smaller. It could be bigger if they had all together.
Yeah. That's not just a national problem, that's an international problem as well, I think.
Yes.